Hello, everyone, and welcome to FanDuel's Work Show as we preview some of the top contenders competing in Kentucky Derby 150. FanDuel proud to be partners of both Churchill Downs and the Kentucky Derby, and we have all angles covered for you with morning coverage as well as afternoon coverage each and every day with the racing leading up to Saturday. I'm Christina Blacker, very happy to be joined by Gabby Gaudet and Andie Biancone to talk about these works today. Ladies, it's Derby week. It's official. We had opening night last night. We had the post positions drawn as well. Gabby, it's really starting to feel like we have a clear picture of this class and how they match up against each other.
I agree with you. All of the final preparations have finally been made. We had the post position draw yesterday. Hopefully we have time to go through some of the post positions and kind of discuss which posts I think were advantageous and disadvantageous for some of the contenders this year. But yeah, it seems like it's all coming together. Now we just have to get our handicapping hats on and do a little bit of work and figure out who's going to win this thing.
Andie, I have to say, I know we've both been out quite a bit in the mornings. I don't think we've really started to see the big crowd, the media swell into Derby week. And I'm sure tomorrow it might change a little bit as we enter Monday and kind of the work week begins for a lot of the more mainstream media. But so far, I feel like it's been pretty peaceful back there watching the horses train.
Yeah, I agree. For some reason, being over at Keeneland until the last day, I was expecting like, okay, here we go. We're jumping into the deep end. But it's been relatively peaceful. Seeing all these horses train, it's just been every year. It never gets old. It's just so amazing to see them all go out at 7:30 and just incredible horse flesh right in front of your eyes.
I do love that. I love the Derby window, the opportunity where it's just the Oaks and the Derby horses training today. I will say, as far as the fans go, the grandstand was pretty packed. So if you are anywhere in the area, definitely come out, enjoy your morning with us, and take a very close look at the Oaks and Derby horses because it's unlike anything else, especially as a fan. If you are a sports fan, you can almost reach out and touch the horses that are running in the Kentucky Derby. It's that close, the access that you have as a fan. Let's take a look at the field again. Post positions were drawn last night. Gabby, I'll let you take this one. Fierceness post position 17, but you mentioned there were maybe some positives, some negatives. What kind of strikes you at first about the draw?
I think it's a really positive post for Fierceness, and I know people with their superstitions say that that specific post position has never won before. I don't put a lot of stock into that. I think it's just circumstantial, especially when we're thinking about the installment of the new gate a couple of years ago. So I think it's only a matter of time before that stall wins. I think it's a great post position for him. The way that this race draws up, he should be able to sit just off of the pace in the clear. I think this is a perfect trip that Johnny Velasquez wants. And then I would say that that's the advantageous post position for Fierceness. I would say I go back and forth with Sierra Leone's post. On one hand, I feel like he doesn't have to hustle or take all the way back to try to save ground if he drew a way outside post position. So I don't think it's, I think post 2 is probably better than post 20, but at the same time, he is a horse that takes a long time to get going, and we'll talk more about that when we take a look at his work. And, he could get stuck down on the inside and find it difficult to weave his way through traffic with post 2.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit this morning on the 11 a.m. show, Andie. The phrase that comes to mind for me with Fierceness is the idea of break running. You really come away from there well, and he's going to hopefully be able to establish that stalking trip just to the outside of the pace, kind of off the first flight of horses, similar to what we saw with American Pharoah, similar to what we saw with Justify. And then those horses along the inside, I think Dorno is committed now, Andie, and then the other two, Sierra Leone and Mystic Dan, they're both going to drop back down together. So that kind of helps those three. I think their style, as compared to where they're drawn alongside each other, lends itself well to everybody maybe getting the position that they want in the early stages.
Absolutely. I think obviously Dornock having two horses that don't have a lot of early pace drawing to his direct outside kind of helps him. Although I just do not like the one hole for Dornock at all. He's very immature mentally, physically. He doesn't strike me as the type of horse who's going to benefit from all that pressure to his outside. Sierra Leone, I actually think the inside post kind of works for him. As Gabby says, it's kind of a horse with a lot of gears. It takes him time to get going, but we've seen fast fractions set in the early stages of the Derby year after year. When those gates open, the Kentucky Derby, it's like no other race. Those jockeys see blood. It's a war. They're gunning it. So a lot of the times, instead of having 20 horses clumped together, you see them more stretched out. So maybe Sierra Leone hugged the rail, and he took a lot of dirt in the bluegrass. He was completely covered, and he was unbothered by that. So I think post for Sierra Leone is okay. Fierceness, I agree with Gabby. Outside is better than inside. Theoretically, he's a horse who likes to dominate other horses. He likes to be able to break and pick and choose his position versus having to gun it from the inside and having other horses put pressure on him. But yeah, I think that's Dornoch with the one hole is an immediate no for me.
Well, speaking of Dornoch, we're going to pick it up with him in terms of our works. He worked in company with his stablemate Society Man. And how about the West Paces Racing? They draw the rail and they draw the 20 post. Gabby, this is Dornoch along the inside. And interestingly, last week they flipped it. Dornoch was outside and Society Man on the inside.
You heard an audible sigh at the post position draw. It was very unfortunate having this post position post 1 and 20. I like what I see from Dornoch in the morning, but I kind of can touch to what Andie said too. Overall, he does have tendencies to be a little bit immature at times, but I actually thought he focused a little bit better down on the inside of Society Man in this work. I thought it was a fine work. And as for Society Man, I don't know. I just kind of get this feeling it was a fine work. I just think that there are other horses in the Kentucky Derby that, they really capture your awe and attention. And I don't know that I felt that from either one of these two. Did you guys disagree with me?
I agree with you, Gabby. One thing that I did notice about this work, and I will have to confirm with Danny Gargan, I promise I will try to get the tea, but Dornoch seems to be wearing a different pair of blinkers in that work. Typically, I've seen him with smaller, like 2-finger blinkers, and those seemed like more full cup blinkers with the little holes in them. So we'll have to confirm with Danny Gargan if he has made that equipment adjustment. But that was a decent work. I wouldn't say. Also, the track was really fast that day, so a lot of those times, like you'd see horses and I talked to some riders. They're like, "Oh, I felt like I worked 102, 103, and they meant 59." Like, So I think the track was a little bit.
It was really
biased.
souped up.
Yeah, it was a little speed bias that day. I mean, you even saw Lemon Muffin work 58 and some, like, pretty wild. So, but they looked good. But like you said, Gabby, I didn't get chills from that work.
46-3. I was standing in the grandstand right next to Danny Gargan, and the first thing he said was the track is fast. I take the opposite opinion. I think Dornoch thrives along the inside. I mean, going back to the Remsen when he was 2 years old and he battled back against Sierra Leone, I have no problem with him along the inside. I don't like the rail post, but he's going to end up in that position because of the rail. And I think he's one of those, he reminds me of Silver Charm. Like if he can see you, he's going to fight you. And that's when you're going to get his best. So I can see
I agree with you, Christina,
a little bit.
I thought it was a much better work with him being on the inside. And that's just the type of horse that he is. He kind of needs that encouragement to the outside. But 19 other horses encouraging him to the outside, I don't know. We'll see.
I agree. Let's move ahead. Actually, speaking of the horse that he was kind of dueling with and battling with in the Remsen, Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone in company with his stablemate Domestic Product. Domestic Product on the outside. Tyler Gaffleone worked Domestic Product, Andie, because Ira Ortiz was riding in New York on this occasion. Sierra Leone kind of setting the tempo on the inside.
Yeah, you can just see Tyler was really on the gas with Domestic Product. With that being said, I do think Sierra Leone kind of galloped out a little stronger than Domestic Product. But as Gabby alluded to earlier, he's a horse with a lot of gears, takes time to get going. No question he's going to thrive with the distance he gets in the Kentucky Derby. But Domestic Product looked excellent. And another thing to consider, the exercise rider on Sierra Leone, granted Chris Bond is not a huge human by any means, but I'm sure he still weighs 5-10 pounds more than Tyler Gaffleone. And weight is something that does make a difference in work. So Tyler Gaffalion, as you can see, feet in the dash, trying to just hold domestic product, stay at shoulder length with Sierra Leone.
Yeah, I'm watching this work and I'm like, what would have happened if Tyler just let him out a notch? Because he was just pulling on him so hard and trying to keep him together, because that's what you want. And Andie can speak to this even more so. It's like, you don't want your company to outwork you unless that's the design of the work. And clearly this wasn't the design of that work. And Tyler had a tough time keeping this horse together, I thought, throughout the entire work. It wasn't like he was keen early and then he settled into his work. He was on the gas. He wanted to go throughout, talking about domestic product. And with Sierra Leone, I just feel like they're two very different workhorses, and it's kind of funny that they did work together, because domestic product keen throughout, I thought, on the muscle, and then Sierra Leone, when every single rider, when Tyler, at least in the afternoon, asks him to go, he digs down a little bit deeper and he switches to a different gear. But it's almost as if he's moving in slow motion. And when you watch those two horses, I think it's especially true when they're going in company, because domestic product, he's got somewhat of a quick stride. Sierra Leone has a long loping stride, and it kind of looks like he's moving in slow motion, but he gets through those gears pretty quickly. So, I mean, I thought this wasn't my favorite work. We'll get to that. It was probably top 3. I just thought both of these horses did really well. I liked it.
I think the way they both move is so different too. Like Sierra Leone is so level, right? Really drops his belly, and he reminds me of like a freight train. The faster he goes, he just gathers that momentum, and as you say, hits those gears. Whereas domestic product, you can see his head is a little higher. He just uses himself in a different way. 5 furlongs in 1:01, by the way, for that work. Let's move ahead to Mystic Dan from Kenny McPeak's barn. This was his work from Saturday. He is going to go 5 furlongs in 1:01 and change, I believe. He's on the outside under Brian Hernandez Jr. And Brian told me after the work, we didn't want to do a whole lot. This was just the finishing touches here, Gabby.
Yeah, I think you have to take the horse in context, right? We're not always going to see these flashy works, and this was what Kenny McPeak wanted to get out of this work. But what I did like about the work, I would say, is that in the beginning of this work, and we kind of caught this work at the top of the stretch or whatever part it was, he looked like he got better as he started to get going, and that's how he runs in the afternoon. He's not a horse that possesses any early speed. He's a horse that takes pace to run at, and he also takes a little bit of time to get going. So, although it wasn't the most eye-catching work that you've ever seen, I think it was his type of work. No different, no worse, no better. It was just a solid work for him.
Yeah, I agree 100%. He really just looked like that was just easy maintenance work. Didn't do anything wrong, didn't do anything overwhelming, but he's moving well across the track. And like you said, Gabby, it's good that he progressively got better throughout the gallop out. I think it's so important to watch these horses gallop out at this point, because obviously they're going to be running a mile and a quarter. It's all about the gallop out.
He really likes Churchill Downs. He broke his maiden here by over 7 lengths. Brian told me that you can really tell when a horse loves a surface, and this is one of those surfaces that Mystic Dan really likes. And I think he's really changed and developed. You look at his early stages in his races, he was much more forwardly placed, maybe a little bit more aggressive. He's settled, he's relaxed. They've really honed in running style from off the pace. Mystic Dan seems to be kind of improving every day. Let's take a look at Brad Cox's horses. He had a pair in company yesterday, Catching Freedom and Encino working together, 5 furlongs and 59-1. Catching Freedom on the inside. Gabby, I've been really impressed watching Catching Freedom in all of his gallops, but this work really opened my eyes to Encino and how well he has popped out of the Lexington.
I have a really tough time with this work. This was my most watched work. If you look at the view tab, I probably watched this work like 15 times because I still don't know what to make of it. You can see at this point of the work, and Catching Freedom, he looks awesome. He's on the inside and Encino's on the outside. And Encino looks like he's traveling well, in addition to Catching Freedom. pay attention to the gallop out. And I don't know if it's that Encino's just kind of a one-paced horse and he gets a really good strong gallop out, or if Catching Freedom is starting to stop a little bit. So Andie, maybe you can speak to this. I don't know if it was a bad work for catching, not a bad work, but an average work for Catching Freedom, or it was an A plus plus work for Encino. I don't really know what to make of it. It's a bit of an illusion, and I can't answer my own question. But look at the gallop out. I mean, Encino clearly beats him on the gallop out.
Encino just looks like, for me, looking at this work, it's like a huge discrepancy physically between Encino and Catching Freedom. Like, if these two were a couple words on a page, Encino is in bold. And another thing, going back to the weight discrepancy, obviously Encino was carrying Florent Giroux, and Catching Freedom had an exercise rider, so you're looking at 10 pounds that the inside horse was carrying. But just physically, there was a lot separating the two horses for me. And Tino's a funny one because going into the Lexington, I liked him on paper. You know, being my Nyquist, trying the dirt for the first time, but he always kind of set slower fractions in all his races at Turfway Park. So when I saw him in person, he's kind of a lump of a horse. He's kind of big and heavy and more compact. He doesn't have a lot of length. And so I was kind of thinking, oh, this horse is just kind of a plotter. He's one pace. And then he completely blew me away, set fast fractions in the Lexington, jumped out on the lead, really woke up. And this work is kind of giving me that same impression as I got in the Lexington. He's aggressive. He's on the bait. He's showing that he's not just a lump. He's not just a grinder. He's got that little bit of speed that you need in the Kentucky Derby. So I like Encino a lot based on that work. He seems to be loving this.
So I'll say this. We talk about Sierra Leone having many gears. I wouldn't describe Encino as a plotter or anything like that. He clearly possesses a lot of natural speed, but I don't know that he has many gears like with Sierra Leone. I think if he gets to his gear, he's really solid. And whether that's, he did get a bit of a pace set up in the Battaglia, so that seemed to be a bit of an illusion, that pace coming back to him closing. And then, the reverse happened. He set the pace in the Lexington. I think he's a very solid horse. He's trending in the right direction. If you look at his thoroughgraphs, if you look at everything, he's getting faster and he's getting better. But to me, he kind of seems like a horse that can be resilient in and around horses. He's just, I think his best trip is going to be forwardly placed in the Derby or mid-pack. But if he has to come with a run, I don't know that that's going to be the best trip for him.
Yeah,
I think Catching Freedom has more gears. You can see almost the stop and start ability, the athleticism, and maybe being in that work with Encino, you didn't get to focus on it as much, but Catching Freedom seems to have it. And Sierra Leone, I mean, he has like a 6 furlong move, practically a 5 furlong move. That's what I think is so scary about him as a competitor, is that he is a lot of good horses, great horses, have a good 3 furlong burst for you. He can do it twice as long and keep getting faster. And that, to me, is his strongest weapon, looking at his recent races. We have a work from this morning. Catalytic went today. He had a pace setter along the inside, and this workmate did set a pretty good tempo for him. He's going to end up with a time of 47-4. And in the initial stages, Andie, I wasn't too crazy about this work, but as they get going and as the rider really drops his head and lets him open up his stride, I thought he finished up really well.
Yes. Definitely. I watched them in the gallop out this morning, and Catalytic absolutely dropped that horse. I found out the inside horse, he's an okay horse. I think he's an allowance type. I can't remember his name, failure on my part, but Catalytic really outworked him, especially in the final parts. But he's a very laid back horse, apparently. I spoke to his exercise rider, Olaf Fernandez, who was on his workmate, and he said Catalytic is just, could gallop him with one pinky. He never wants to do more than he's asked, which is kind of nice. But he said that the idea of this work was really just to give him a target, something to get him focused. He likes to catch horses when he's by himself. He's smart. He's not trying to do too much. But you can just see how happy he looks in this gallop out. He couldn't look any better.
Yeah, I like what we saw.
I saw the work. I saw it very similarly to what Andie described. I thought it was a good work, and you clearly want to pay attention to that gallop out, and you want to pay attention to the gallop out when he loses his workmate too. And it still seemed like he kept that focus and kept lengthening his stride. So I thought that was a good sign.
I know someone had to run second to Fierceness, and he was the horse. But when you put it in the context that was his first 2-turn race, it's pretty nice race to build off of for Catalytic. Yes, he has a lot of building to do, but not many horses could have done that in their first try around 2 turns. Just Steele, we have a work from him as well for the Hall of Famer for the coach, Dwayne Lucas. This one from today as well, early this morning. 4 furlongs and 50 and change. And this wasn't my favorite work. Gabby, I'll let you jump in here first. I just thought the rider had to really kind of ask him a little bit to stay with it and just to stay focused today.
Yeah, she did have to ask a little bit early, and then even throughout, it kind of seemed like the rider just kept having to niggle him along. And I don't know. This definitely wasn't my favorite work as well, Christina. You just want to see a horse that's really easily getting over the track and getting over the track with their whole body, right? It's not just their legs moving back and forth. And he just didn't show that to me. It didn't look like he really got into himself. Yeah, I wouldn't say that this was one of my favorite works. What about you, Andie?
Yeah, I think this horse is he's interesting. Sometimes Wayne Lucas works this horse a mile. So maybe he just needs more room to work with. Maybe,
Yeah, that's very fair.
Some horses are, for example, like I'm sorry, it's so off topic. I always relate it to my own horses, but Viva La Red, my 1.5-mile turf horse, you work her 4 furlongs and it's very difficult for her. It's way easier for her to work a mile, go in 14s to the wire and let her roll home 50 the last half of the mile. I feel like Just Steele is kind of like that too. He's very big. I spoke to Wayne Lucas this morning.
He is a big boy.
Yes. I spoke to Wayne Lucas this morning. He said he would have liked to see a faster work from this horse. But I think 50 is okay. Hopefully leave something left in the tank for Saturday. And the horse seems like, and Wayne also does not like to gallop out. It's so funny. Like some trainers are, make sure they gallop out, make sure they finish. Wayne thinks horses he doesn't like to gallop out. So he'll often just have the rider slow him down to a normal gallop once they pass the wire. But I think Just Steele, I think we can excuse him a little bit. I think he's the type of horse who just needs more room to work with.
That's a great point. He did work the mile on April 20th.
The best to ever do it. So he knows what he's doing, especially when it comes to the Kentucky Derby.
I'm like, gallop out. It's all about the gallop out. Wayne's like, no, brakes.
Yeah, who are we to question, right? Just Steele, he is definitely fit, most experienced in the field, and he did work that mile on April the 20th. So his work 2 back was really where they got the best of him in the mornings. Honor Marie, his final work was on the 25th. So we're talking 9 days from the Kentucky Derby. He's on the outside. I think this is going to be his last real serious drill unless Whit Beckman decides to give him a little blowout in the next couple of days. He catches the bullet here, Gabby, 59-1. And this was an eye-opening work. I thought he caught a lot of attention and really became the buzz horse off this move.
Yeah, I really liked this work as well. It just looked like a perfectly executed work as well. And that's so important at this time, a couple of weeks out from the Kentucky Derby. He got going, he stuck with his workmate, and as Andie mentioned too, the gallop out, in my opinion, is very important, especially when you're considering certain trainers and their operations. And I just thought this was a solid work throughout the lane. And then I especially liked the gallop out. It just looked like he was really willing, in the final couple of strides here and then through the gallop out. So I can't say really anything negative about this work. I am curious to see what he does in the next couple of days. I would imagine he might blow him out a little bit because that just seems like a long time to go out without any type of work. But maybe Andie can speak to that even more. What did you think of the work?
I thought the work was great. It's really interesting because I've seen some works from Honor Marie up at the fairgrounds, and I don't think he was moving as well across that track. he clearly has an affinity for Churchill Downs. He really likes it. With that being said, I feel like Witt is still kind of a boutique trainer. He's incredible. He's done such an amazing job, but probably doesn't have the same stock as some of these other trainers. So you have to consider that too. Who is working with Anna Marie? He probably, the workmate you saw was really struggling to kind of keep up, and that really flattered Anna Marie. But you gotta, it's sometimes harder as the little guys to find horses you can go with. Your good horses is a problem me and my dad have sometimes. So, but I thought it was a great work. The horse clearly loves the track.
One thing I've noticed about him is he's a little quirky on the other days. Like, he's always got his head cocked to the side. He gallops, so travels really wide behind. He seems like a quirky horse, but I think the faster he goes, the better he looks, if that makes sense.
He was like jogging today and was kind of like not paying attention, and he stumbled, and he got like mad that he stumbled. He was like, no, I'm good.
He does that all the time with that head sideways. Let's move on to Just a Touch from Brad Cox's barn. Another work from yesterday, 5 furlongs in a minute and 1. And whereas he worked his other 2 in company, Andie Just a Touch goes on his own under Florent Giroux.
Oh, this horse is such a beast. I really, really like this horse. At the Bluegrass, him and Sierra Leone really were these standouts physically amongst the whole group. But I think it's a testament to just how well this horse is doing. The fact that he was able to work on his own and be in such contention with such ease. He gets across the track beautifully. He's a serious horse. He should be taken seriously, no doubt.
I love this work. Love.
Yeah.
I love this work. I love this horse. I love the post position. I love this work. I love the post position. I love how he's just trending in the right direction. It just looks how I was mentioning too, we cut it short, but he just looked like that was effortless. He was not getting into the ground. It was like he was staying on top of the dirt and just kind of floating on top of the surface. And it is hard when you look at horses that aren't working in company, because sometimes it can, again, be a bit of an illusion. Or the reverse can apply as well. Sometimes it looks like a better work than what it might really be, but you just really want to see, and I brought this up with the Just Steel work, you want to see their whole body like in rhythm, getting over the track, just a really fluid motion. And that's what I saw from this workout.
Yeah, I love everything we see about this horse. He's a son of Justify out of a Taffet mare, a touching beauty, just beautifully bred, and every stride seems to get longer. I love the reach up front that you can see all the way through the gallop out. Big work from Just a Touch yesterday from Brad Cox's barn. Steve Asmussen with workers as well. Track Phantom went 5 furlongs in a minute in company. The typical Asmussen 5 furlongs in a minute, exactly what he always wants out there, Andie. One thing that's curious, though, is that he has decided to add blinkers to him. He's already kind of a speedy horse, but we're looking at an equipment change going into the Derby.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Maybe this will just help him get that extra gear. I don't think he's wearing very big blinkers, maybe 2 fingers at most. I don't think Steve is the type to really put huge blinkers on anything. But I liked what I saw from this work. He looked fantastic.
Yeah, so he does look a little bit keen early, right? And I don't necessarily mind that, but he was really eager to break away from the pole there. Is it? My screen is frozen, guys. Okay, there we go. So
yeah, we were too.
Okay. Although I worked it a couple of times, I would like to, if we could, show the end of the work, because from what I can recall, it did seem like he kind of settled into his work. At the beginning, kind of seemed a little bit erratic, and then he kind of settled into that work. I think it is a curious call to add the blinkers, and I wonder what the hope is, with the addition of blinkers. Maybe, like Andie said, he does seem like a horse that has been so durable and so consistent throughout the Triple Crown, the Derby prep races, but he does need to improve in order to win. Has he kind of hit his ceiling? Will this equipment change or tinkering with him a little bit maybe help him find a little bit more in the Kentucky Derby. Or maybe Steve thinks that his best option or his best way of winning the Kentucky Derby is to be on the lead, and he really wants to get get him to focus and be on the lead and go from there. But no, I thought it was a solid work. It was a typical Steve Asmussen work, and I really liked how he finally settled into the work with the addition of those blinkers.
I wondered about that too, Gabby, and I think hopefully over the next couple of days we have the chance to talk to Steve Asmussen and just ask him a little bit, because in the initial stages, even with the blinkers, it looked like the rider was trying to rate him off the other horse and get him to relax a little bit. But maybe that was just them trying not to go too fast, not necessarily teaching him something different. They just know that Steve doesn't want a fast work. So now you're kind of catch 22. Like, what do you do? Would you let the horse level up with his company and risk making the boss upset? Or do you really take a hold and then you get in a little bit of a fight with him in the early stages of the work?
Yeah. I think the rider did a great job settling him just half a length, because if he hooked up head and head, they would have gone way too fast. And Steve
that's
definitely
what you want to do. Like with the blinkers on, the last thing you want him to be is rank, right? You want to teach him a lesson in the morning, in the workouts, that no, although these things are on you and like you can still go fast, we have to kind of ease into that speed. So I thought it was a really useful work.
Let's move ahead to West Saratoga for Larry Demerit. There's so many wonderful articles online if you want to read a little bit more about Larry, about his story. Just an incredible man. This Son of Exaggerator was second in the Jeff Ruby last time out. Here's a look at his work yesterday. Beautiful gray, and he gets over the track well enough in here. I thought, Andie, just kind of a workman-like move, I guess you could say.
Yeah, definitely easy, nice little blowout that he got here. This is a horse who undoubtedly loves Churchill Downs. He's our Iroquois winner. But it looked good. I mean, you saw the rider kind of flash a stick at him at one point. I guess just trying to get some wind. Lead change was good. It wasn't my favorite of everybody, but it looked solid.
Yeah, and I think beyond just how he looked, the progression of workouts, I think, is curious, and maybe you guys can touch on this as well. His workout at the Thoroughbred Training Center, he worked 3 furlongs, and then he came back with a 6 furlong workout, and then came back with a 3 furlong workout, at least posted. I don't know. I wonder why that is, and I haven't had the opportunity to go out and speak to Larry as to what's the thought process behind that in preparation for the Derby. I didn't know if you guys had read any articles or spoken to him about that.
It's interesting. It seems like he wants a good gallop out. Like that horse may have worked 3 furlongs and had an aggressive gallop out. But it'd be interesting to see exactly the tactics. If he works 6 furlongs, does he not gallop out?
Yeah, I've got questions for you, Larry.
I tried to stop him for an interview yesterday, but he had an entire camera crew around him and they wanted to get back to the barn. So to be attended to at a later date, hopefully. We'll try again.
On the to-do list.
Yes, add it to the list. Yeah. Let's move ahead to Endlessly, and this is going to be a very important work. And this is actually his work from the 20th, and he's on the inside here in company, Gabby. I've watched a few of his works, and I'm going to say his work this week was much better than the one we're watching, because I think you can tell here that he is not at his best over the dirt here at Churchill, and he doesn't quite have the stride that we saw in the Jeff Ruby on synthetic.
Well, in this workout too, and we talked about how executing a workout is very important, and how the Anna Marie workout, it just seemed like everything went perfectly. The workmate stayed with him, and just it was executed so well by both riders. It really did seem like the horse to his outside was trying to run off in the early stages of the race, and tried to, you want to ease into this workout and go faster along the way. And I think with the horse on the outside just going really fast early, kind of got him going early. And then I did not like the gallop out here. You can see, obviously, he's really struggling to keep up with his workmate on the outside. The rider's really scrubbing on him. The workmate goes past him very easily, and I just didn't see a strong gallop out.
Yeah, these two riders just really didn't, they weren't vibing. Sometimes it's so essential when you're working horses, especially for these big works like this, to have good communication. The inside horse, you are setting the pace. That is your job. You are in charge of the time. And as the outside horse, it is your job not to make your inside company too rank. So you don't want to get head in them and make them too rank early and then you go too fast. You just want to stay, and you don't want to pass them either. And you don't want to be too far behind. You got to just sit off them.
We're losing you, Annie.
Sorry. Togetherness.
She was getting really excited. I love it.
Togetherness, and then coming together in the stretch, finishing head in head, so important. That was not a great work, but could have been.
I think the more recent one went a little better. And Andie, would you agree? And I've always kind of thought this, that when you're on a horse who is working on a surface that might not be their favorite, their most preferred, they come off the bridle a little bit more. Like you don't really have them fully in the bridle and a lot of contact with their mouth. They're just a little bit more hesitant and not quite leaning down and giving you 100%.
Yes, I agree, Christina. It's crazy. Some turf horses, you work them on the dirt and they really struggle. Less so on Churchill Downs dirt, just because I feel like that's kind of it's a weird, like you talked about earlier in the week, Christina. It's a very springy surface. It has more clay. It has more spring. It's a little more shallow. It's a little kinder towards a turfy horse. It gives me some promise that Endlessly has been able to perform well both on the synthetic and the turf. It kind of gives me more a green flag that just fine on Derby Day on this Churchill Downs dirt surface, as we've seen the Jeff Ruby year after year kind of produce really competitive horses. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
There's no doubt he's an excellent horse. He's 5 for 6 lifetime, the son of Oscar Performance. Endlessly seems to be getting better day by day. Every day he looks better. So we're looking forward to seeing what he can do from post position 14. Okay, let's get to Fierceness, to our favorite in this year's Kentucky Derby. 4 furlongs and 48 and 4 for his final breeze. He's on the outside here in company. And Gabby, as we have come to appreciate and to learn from Todd Pletcher's barn, it's not just about the work. It's about the gallop out, and this was an A+ all around.
A+ all around, Christina. I'm just going to say that I really loved this workout and Just a Touch. I almost want to give Fierceness the number 1 slot and Just a Touch the number 2 slot, and that took me some time to figure that out. But I thought that these two horses worked particularly well, and Fierceness all around just it just seems like he's coming into the Derby, just checking all the boxes right now.
You and I talked about this a little bit the other day, just looking back to his Holy Bull, and we'll get that work up for you if we can. We're having some technical difficulties. I think he was a little short going into the Holy Bull. I think Todd had a plan to get this horse to peak this weekend, and I think the plan is going perfectly right now. I don't think we can hold it against him, and I don't think we can say that he, spits the bit and takes his toys when he doesn't get what he wants. I think this horse has just been brought along a little slower in his 3-year-old season.
Yeah, the only race that I just can't really figure out is the Champagne. I can figure out the Holy Bull. I can figure out any other race. I cannot figure out the Champagne. He just kind of laid an egg in that race. But with the Holy Bull, I think it was for two reasons. Number one, why would Todd have this horse cranked up and ready to roll and give his 100% off the layoff? It just doesn't seem like very Todd-esque. And then also, he didn't have a great trip, and I think people don't give that enough credit, especially on the main track at Gulfstream on a day like the Holy Bull when you're dealing with a souped-up track. You don't want to have this wide pressing trip, and that's exactly what he got. He lost his position because of a poor gate break going into the first turn, and Johnny had to sit wide with him throughout. So I could actually find a lot of excuses. I wasn't down on him after the Holy Bowl. I knew he would come back in a big way. And it seemed like physically, too, he totally turned a corner after the Holy Bowl in his workouts and how he was presenting himself physically at Gulfstream the day of the race at Florida Derby, for the Florida Derby, I should say. Yeah, I guess the concern with him, I think he'll be able to take pressure. He's not one, to me, he's not one that's going to be throw in the towel. I think he has actually a little bit more heart than what most people give him credit for. My thing is, that was such a phenomenal performance. How much more are we going to see from him in the Derby? I mean, he posted a 110 buyer and it was a brilliant race. Can he pair up back-to-back brilliant races? Because he's going to need to.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I don't know if it's enough of an excuse, but I think in the Champagne, that lunging at the start, it's almost a mental thing. If he doesn't break well, then maybe that's where he doesn't hit a rhythm. And you hear jockeys talking so much about it's not just the break, it's not just where you find your early position. It's about establishing that rhythm with your horse. And I think if you don't get the opportunity to do that, some horses just don't get their legs underneath them, and maybe that's the reason. Andie's back with us. Whoop. Spoke too soon. Hey, Andie, we're talking about fierceness, and I do want you to tell everyone what you mentioned on the 11 o'clock show this morning, just about his coat and how fierceness has changed in a good way just in the last month or so.
Yeah, Todd Pletcher really is the GOAT, and if this Derby season has taught me anything, it's trust the process, because as much as I love Todd and Team Tav, I have been the most anti-fierceness. I'm like, all you sheets and numbers players, no, this horse hasn't physically changed one bit from the Breeders' Cup throughout any of the Florida Derby preps. I remember seeing him at the Holy Bull, and my jaw was on the ground. The horse looked dull. He had no energy. His coat wasn't great. Didn't grow at all in height, in width, and anything from the Breeders' Cup. He still looked very juvenile. And I was like, ooh, that's not a good sign for the 2-year-old champ. And then Florida Derby, I will say he looked better. His coat started to turn around. He had gained a little weight. And I saw him this morning at Churchill Downs, and he looked fabulous. He really has put an inch on all around, kind of filled in. His coat is shiny. And I think it's just all Todd getting him to peak on the right day. You want them to be at their best on that first Saturday in May, and maybe it has really taken all this time, and horses are living things. You could be doing nothing different, and suddenly they just come into form. With every race, with every work, being a trainer is almost like cooking. You're cooking, and you want this stew. You turn up the heat, you turn down the heat. You want this stew to taste the best it can. I maybe I'm just hungry. I'm comparing things to food all the time, but
Sounds delicious.
Yeah, it's all a process, and clearly Fierceness, I think, is looking the best he's ever looked.
I want to say one more point before we move on, because obviously we're looking at Sierra Leone and Fierceness as the top two favorites, the top two Derby contenders this year for the most part. When I look, and I love Sierra Leone, I think he's a rare talent. Like he's a really, really nice horse. Fierceness, really, really nice horse. But there are certain qualities that you want to look for in a Derby winner. And my problem with Sierra Leone is he does have those gears and he works through them, and I wouldn't say, it's hard to, I don't know how to specifically describe it, because I don't want to say that he's not light on his feet, but he does have a long loping stride. It's just it's a different type of movement than we see from Fierceness. Fierceness, when I watched that work, he was so light on his feet. It just looked like everything was effortless. He was really agile. And to me, it's like those are the qualities that you need to be able to win the Derby. You need to be able to think quick on your feet, pivot. And I know a lot of people say that he needs everything to go his way. I'm starting to think the opposite. I actually think he's a tremendous athlete and he's pretty agile.
It's like a
I agree.
Tesla versus a Mack truck.
Yeah. I think you need to combine them though, because it seems to me like Fierceness has the athleticism. He has the lightness, the quickness. I think Sierra Leone has the fight. But if you stop that momentum and if you stop that train, I don't know how long it's going to take him to get back going again.
Yeah.
And so we've seen them each prove those individual characteristics that you need. The ideal horse has them all. And I don't know if we have we just haven't seen that from one of them at this point. It's not to say they don't have it, but they haven't shown us all of those different.
That's what makes it really, really hard to win the Kentucky Derby.
I will say, when I interviewed Tyler Gaffleone after the Bluegrass on the pony, and first thing he said to me was, "Andie, I'm going to win the Kentucky Derby." Like, full confidence. And the horse was not blowing a candle. Like, not even tired. The horse was just like, what? Like, that was hard.
He did it so easily. And it's important to keep in mind how speed favoring the track was at Keeneland on Bluegrass Day. No horse was making up any ground. And here he comes from last, just rolling like a freight train. And even when Tyler asked him a little bit, you could see it probably about a 16th of a mile out from the finish line. He kind of like went, ooh, like he took him on to like a whole nother level. And I'm not denying this horse's talent. He's going to do some big, big things. But like Christina said, if he gets stopped along the way, is he quick enough to recover from that and get back into his rhythm? That would be my only concern with this horse, because I'm not concerned about anything else. He is extremely talented.
I agree. And he's probably just going to have to go wide, right? Unless you see a perfect path to cut a corner. He has that big long move, but he's probably going to, That's hard to find. All right, let's move on to Stronghold. We're going to be here all night. 5 furlongs and 59.4. Stronghold Wet and Company. He's on the outside. This is Notorious on the inside, a grade 1 caliber sprinter. And I think that's worth noting, because you're going to set a good fast pace with a horse like that. And I think Joe Talamo, who's on Stronghold, had to really take a hold here to try and not do too much, but it was a good work for him, Andie.
It absolutely was. It was so funny. You could hear Martin Garcia was on Notorious on the inside. Joe Talamo was on Stronghold, and these two both had ponies taking them to the pole. Pony let them go maybe a pole before, and both of these riders, who are both extremely strong, talented guys, were like, ah! Like, you could hear them be like, oh my gosh, like, ah! Feet in the dash! So, and Joe Talamo really never let this horse off the bridle, and the fact that this 3-year-old, although granted you've got a 2-turn dirt horse versus a turf sprinter, but even so, the fact that this 3-year-old was able to outwork, in my opinion, I think he outworked Notorious, outwork a 6-year-old multiple graded stakes winner, finished 5th in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint most recently. That's saying something.
Yeah, no, it really is. I thought this was a very strong work as well, and we'll take it back up again. And, I thought that both riders did a great job to underscore that other point too, in that you really want to deliver on the execution of workouts. The inside workmate, Notorious, setting the tempo early. Joe Talamo just trying to get this horse to ease into the work. And I did think that this was a really good work as well.
One more look at Stronghold along the outside, your Santa Anita Derby winner. Another point that we brought up this morning on the 11 o'clock show was just about the management from Phil D'Amato. And I think it was really wise to send him to Sunland, because with all of Bob Baffert's horses out west, running in these prep races, not able to earn those points, but then the points kind of vanishing off the leaderboard because of it, he was able to establish a good little cushion of points early in the season. Then he runs on the Santa Anita Derby and he won it, but you didn't know if Nisos was going to show up. You didn't know if May Moon was going to show up. You didn't know that Muth was going to run in the Arkansas Derby the week prior. So in your mind, you had to be thinking, if I run second or third in the Santa Anita Derby and that's my last race, is that going to be enough? Well, with the insurance he had from the Sunland Derby victory, that's what put him in the position to just have a little bit more comfort going in to the Santa Anita Derby. He wins, and Phil D'Amato, as a perennial leading trainer, Santa Anita, Del Mar, all through Southern California. This is his first Kentucky Derby starter. It's real proof of how difficult it is to get here. This is a top class horseman in the entire country, and this is his first Derby horse. So good luck to them with Stronghold and Antonio Fresu, who will be aboard. Bill Mott, Hall of Famer, worked both of his horses today. Let's talk about Resilience. We do have just FYI a little bit later for you for the Oaks. 4 furlongs and 49-1 from Resilience. And one thing I noticed, Andie, from both of Bill's horses, he didn't want much this morning. They were off the rail. They were under a tight hold. And this was just one last kind of easy breeze going into the race.
Yes, and both horses look good doing it. Resilience, he's a really big horse. I like that he has so much energy underneath him, and yet he was standing on the track with Bill Mott prior to his work and was just so relaxed, carried himself with a lot of class, was just looking at everything head up like good horses do. And like you said, Christina, the rider is off the rail, has him on a hold, doesn't want to do too much, but I think it speaks a lot that this horse was able to carry out such an effortless work just without any company, without being asked much for anything. He just seems to be doing everything right.
Yeah, and he definitely seems like a horse that's improving with time, right? I mean, it's taken him a long time to get to his best stride, but you'd rather him get to his best form now than 6 months ago, right?
Yeah.
So it does look like he's kind of trending in the right direction. At the end of the day, I don't know how strong the Wood Memorial was. Society Man was also in that race. I just thought that some of the main players didn't show up for whatever reason. And historically, the Wood Memorial, at least recently, since the point system has been introduced for the Kentucky Derby and the prep races, it's not been strong. I think the best runner was Tacitus a couple years ago when he finished 4th. So it was a good work. It was fine. It would just have to it would take a little bit more to sell me on this horse, I guess.
Yeah, there's been such a chatter over the last several years, too, the Wood being downgraded. But then you think about some of the best horsemen that are in New York year-round. They go down to South Florida. Those horses tend to go other places. So it's almost understandable that we haven't seen maybe as strong of a contingent coming from the Wood Memorial as of late. Let's talk about the Oaks a little bit. We also drew post positions for the Oaks last night on the opening evening program. Here's the second page of those odds. Just FYI, 9-2. Leslie's Rose 4-1. Both drawn towards the outside. We'll flip it back to the inside and show you those post positions as well for these fillies. Taffet Janelli along the rail. Gin for Brad Cox, a big 30-1. Torpedo Anna keeps impressing in the morning. She's 5-1. And Tarifa 7-2 as the morning line choice. Let's start with Just FYI. We're going to keep it in the Bill Mott barn. We just saw Resilience. His filly, Just FYI, your 2-year-old champ. I loved this work. I loved her last work. Gabby, the way that you were so kind of enchanted by Just a Touch and by Fierceness, my eyes cannot leave this filly when she's on the track lately.
Yeah, and look, this is very important. I would say all works are very important, but particularly for Just FYI, because she really started to get going late in the season for her 3-year-old year. And every work matters, every race matters. I thought it was a bang up performance in the Ashland, and then she comes back and sometimes a race like that can take a little bit of wind out of their sails, right? Coming out of those types of races, especially when it's the first race off a layoff. But I'm just really happy to see her energy level still positive. She's still clicking out these workouts, and this just looked like an effortless work.
Yeah, it really was. And even the beginning, Junior Alvarado was talking to her, and you could hear him. And he was just like, "Oh, mama, easy, mama, easy." Like, she's just so happy, so forward. And really a big difference in her physically from the Ashland to now. I think with Bill Mott running her in the Ashland, he really just wanted to get it run under her belt, even if she wasn't at 100% fitness, 100% readiness. I don't want to say fitness because she's always pretty light, pretty fit, but she just wasn't in her 100%, peak form.
Didn't she have a fever before the race in Florida? Didn't she miss? She scratched, right, before the Devona Dale. So I think they've been playing catch up, but he might have finally got to where he wants to be with her now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Yeah, and it's so crazy. I've seen it with Bill Mott's horses, Todd Pletcher's horses, and Chad Brown's horses. The difference from what these horses looked like at Gulfstream to now, it's like you just brought them to the Kentucky air and they're just like
Well,
involved, like
and
unleash, but
it's
just
like the theory, it's the theory of 10,000 hours, right? It just takes time. It takes repetition year after year. It takes stock as well. When you have as many horses as Chad Brown, as Brad Cox, Todd Pletcher, Bill Mott, when you have, even throwing Steve Asmussen into that mix, when you have the breadth of the amount of horses that they have in their stable, and talented horses to boot, and you get to experience with them and kind of experiment every single year to see what works with them, what doesn't, you can figure out how to get them at their best on the first Saturday in May. And that's what we're seeing from these top barns.
I would agree. We have one more work to share with you. We're going to stay with the Oaks. We have Tarfa, who's the morning line choice in the Kentucky Oaks at 7-2. She's on the outside, and she is a handful
What is going
with
on with her?
Jin along the inside. Gabby, we'll let you take this one first.
Yeah, this isn't pretty. I mean, her mouth is wide open. She is, I'm going to say it, rank. I mean, she's absolutely ranked. She's keen to go. She doesn't really look happy in the beginning stages of this race. Her ears are flat pinned back. And her mouth is wide open. That's just not a good sign of any type of control. But do you guys know who was on her for this work?
I do not. I believe these were both exercise riders, if I'm remembering correctly. Yes.
Let's see. It looks like Kelvin on the inside, and they're two exercise riders, it looks like.
Okay. Well, she finally starts to ease into the work, right? But it just didn't seem as maybe fluid as you would hope. It's like you kind of have to fight her early, fight, and then you let her go. And then that's what I saw from this work. It just wasn't fluid. It was like two different works in one. And then on top of that, of course, you really want to pay attention to the gallop out. And it seemed like the workmates stuck with each other on the gallop out, which is, I think, a good sign.
I'll correct myself on that. So it was Kelvin on Jin, Flavien Prat actually on Tarfa, and he's going to ride her in the race. He has experience on her, but yeah, definitely in a bit of a tussle to get that work started.
It's funny though, because I saw her galloping this morning and she didn't look rank at all. So honestly, some horses are smart. You put a jockey on for their work, they know it's work time. They're excited to go. They're like, oh, like she was galloping chill on the bridle, like so easy, but they know their people. They know, okay, this is my exercise rider. I'm just going to gallop today. And clearly she knew Flavien was on her. But it doesn't bother me so much. I think fillies can be like that, just like, especially talented, strong-minded fillies, and she just clearly looked like she wanted to go. Flavien did the right thing to just keep her behind until it was time to come together. Also, like, big weight discrepancy between Kelvin and Flavien as well.
Well, Gabby, Annie, we've gone through a lot here in terms of the works. I know we all have a lot of studying, a lot more replays and speed figures to be checking, but hopefully for everyone at home and for anyone that's had the chance to watch this, not only with us live, but if you're watching it a little bit later on the streaming show, hopefully we have helped you out in terms of selecting your horses. Ooh, here's a tough one, but we won't hold you to this. Gabby, top 4 in the Kentucky Derby.
I really want to go back and watch more replays before I corner myself with answering this question. But I will say my top 4 in terms of the workouts. I mentioned this earlier. I'd say Fierceness is number 1. I loved Just a Touch. Number 2, I might even put Just a Touch number 1. I'm battling between those two. I thought that I just really liked both of them. And I like the post positions and the form and everything coming into it. I'll throw Sierra Leone in the top 4. And outside of that, I don't know. It's going to depend on the day for my long shot. I'm battling between maybe Catalytic or Mystic Dan. I'm kind of looking at those horses, but I want to do a little bit more work before I pick.
Lots more work to do. Luckily for you guys at home, we do have that no sweat win bet offer for you. So you can hopefully take advantage of that. And that is for all customers. Make sure you take advantage of this one. Head to the app, head to the website. Make sure you opt into all of the promotions and take advantage of your no sweat derby bet up to $20. Also share it with your friends. Let everybody know if they're new to horse racing. This is often the time of year when we have new fans coming in to join the ranks. And so we hope that you'll share these offers and just kind of try to bring a few more people into the fold in the next week. Lots more live racing to come in the next few days as well. A reminder, there's no racing today or tomorrow, but we do have 5-0 Tuesday. We have racing on Wednesday, then Thurby, Kentucky Oaks, and Kentucky Derby. For Andie Biancone, Gabby Gaudet, I'm Christina Blacker. We will see you out in the mornings at Churchill Downs, and we'll see you back for racing on Tuesday.